Okay, so I'm talking and I'm on the screen. So do you want to talk?
Yep. Can you hear me? Yep. So we're live.
So I'm talking and I'm on. Okay, I can't see you. You're not you're. So I can see you now.
Can you see me now?
Yes. So what did you do? What button did you push so we can make sure that you push that button next time? What did you push?
Oh, I could see you the whole time. So,
Okay.
so you,
See, we couldn't see you before. Now I can see when you talk, your face comes up. So did you push something to
there's a little camera down below.
so you didn't have your camera on.
Bizarre, but when the camera's off, I can't see you.
Yeah, so now we're working. Yahoo. Okay.
But can they hear me? That
Uh,
was the issue. There was the issue before.
can people hear? No. They could hear you. They couldn't see you.
Oh, they can see me now.
Yeah, because you've switched your camera on. Cool. White man's magic, mate.
Okay, yeah, I'm still a bit confused because when my camera was turned off, a few shows ago, yeah, I couldn't see anything. I don't know. I guess the good news is we're live again.
Yeah, and I've deleted. Yeah. So do you want to repeat what you said?
That they can definitely hear me and see me now.
Absolutely. I can. Yep.
Okay.
I've logged on from another account and I can see you
Oh, cool.
because you've turned your camera on.
Oh, okay. Testing. Hello, anybody home? Lights on, no one's home. So to summarize basically the last 20 minutes, we are starting a series on the Stones' influences. And we've been heavy into the blues, which we all love. We know the Stones love the blues, but a particular individual that's a giant in the realm of music and the original Mr. Rock and Roller was and something we can't deny, especially from Keith Richards to the Beach Boys to John Lennon to Eric Clapton, is the influence of Mr. Chuck Berry. And I think Chuck Berry, summarizing, was the first guitar singer-songwriter showman. I mean, who can ever forget the duck walk and all the moves and just all his great songs? They had energy. They were themes of weekends and dancing and new cars and cutting class and getting paid from your job and having a good time. Basically, I think that what Chuck embodied in the world of music was having fun. And that's what I think. That's why a lot of people could relate to him. Because let's face it, after 40 hours of working, what do you want to do? Most people want to have fun. At least I used to.
Well, certainly, if you're 18 to 24, you should be.
And that's the audience that he was clever enough to target. I think he saw a big in the 50s with the segregation and the black and white TV and electricity being relatively new. He saw a big market. You can't tell me that he wasn't getting his hair cut and seeing the juke joints and the jukeboxes and the 45s, and he could just see that market and people wanted to have fun.
Yeah, and I suppose that at another level too, he could see that music in the form of rock and roll was a type of rebellion. He could see that. He could see that, and certainly and not a rebellion in a like let's tear down the walls kind of sense, but certainly a rebellion in the sense of young people being able to make a determined effort as far as what they were going to do with any money that they had made. They were going to make decisions about what they were going to do with their leisure time. And that fitted in with the consumerism, the post-war boom in America, and having fun. That key thing that you said about having fun. People had enough money. Music was important for people to have fun.
And his timing was great. World War II was over. America was experiencing a buoyant economy. I mean, Chevrolet, Ford, Dodge, Chrysler, people attributed fun to material things, and we saw it in the movies like, for example, Back to the Future and Pulp Fiction. The cars and PS335 and the kids don't.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, as far as my understanding and exposure to Chuck Berry, goes back to my listening to the Stones. Everybody, I suppose, at a young age heard a couple of these Chuck Berry songs. I certainly do remember hearing Chuck Berry, but as far as listening to him and paying attention to him, it wasn't until I became a Stones nut, and then you saw references that Keith would make to this thing called the ancient art of weaving guitars, and how Keith said Memphis was the key song for him as far as hearing two guitars playing together, and he thought, wow, this was good. And then he was listening to other guys like Jimmy Rogers, the Miles Brothers, Hubert Sumlin, Matt Guitar Murphy, Jimmy Reed, and Eddie Taylor, and all these other guys. So I think we certainly have Chuck Berry to be thankful there. Certainly too for making the double stop famous, because that simple technique, it's simple in one sense, but you try playing it and try and replicate a lot of what Chuck was trying to do, you can end up in trouble. And we've seen that in that rock and roll movie where Keith Richards is getting a kick up the backside by by Chuck because he's not playing it right.
Yeah. Those what's interesting is the double stops you play flat, but when you raise it up and down, it's called a slur. And Keith was playing the slur, going, I wish I had my guitar here, but he's going up. But Chuck said, and Chuck doesn't read music, but Chuck knows the sound because he wrote it. He wanted the slur to come down. So it's a particular sound that Chuck was after, which Chuck did, and Keith thought he had it, but he didn't.
I think it was also the old dog put in the new dog in his place too.
Yeah, well, and credit to Chuck. In order to make it in show business, you got to have an ego. And Chuck had that. Because Chuck was a little bit bitter. He was, even though he projected all these great themes of school, holidays, weekends, cars, fun, dancing, music, rebellion. He did have a hard time. Obviously his background, and he had a few brushes with the law.
Yeah. Well, most of us will appreciate the fact that we love the Stones from that 68 period to 72, and I certainly love that. That's the classic period for me. But one of the great things that I love about the Stones music is that you can break it down into chapters, and if you want that hard urban Chicago style, you can't beat that 64 to 65 period where they recorded 12 by 5 and Rolling Stones #2 at Chess Studios, where Bill Wyman said that they could turn their amps up. It was the first time when they were recording that they could actually turn their amps up and get that harmonic and that overdrive sound that they couldn't get in London. And the 4 tracks as opposed to the 2 tracks. So critical period, that 64 to 65 period, because Chicago Blues has been played really well by some English guys.
And touching on that famous album you mentioned, 12 by 5, the whole album was recorded in Chess Studios, and those Chess brothers wouldn't have been dummies. They would have probably heard the Stones demo songs, the first album, and they thought, you know what, these guys are good. And
well, I think a lot of credit needs to go to Ron Marlowe, because he was the legend at Chess. He was the guy that recorded a lot of those Chess guys, and I would say probably he more than anybody understood what these young English cats were trying to do.
Yeah, he was the engineer, and when we think of Chuck, and the reason, and Keith's famous quote was, he said his world was never the same after this, when he heard that intro to Johnny Be Good, and the reporter said, so what was it, Keith? And he just said 2 words. He goes, the sound.
Yeah.
So he knew, Ron Marlowe, like Andrew was saying, could sense that the Stones could capture that energy. So when you mentioned Chuck Berry and the major chords and that boogie woogie beat and the double stops, there's a lot of energy. It's basically the blues sped up with a different theme. So yeah, no, the Stones are very clever in basing a big part of their sound on Chuck, because you can't play blues at a concert and expect the whole crowd to be having fun. When we hear Little Queen.
Yeah, I think one of the key things about Ron Marlowe obviously sorry, you froze there before. Was there another message that came through?
No.
Oh.
Just intermittent sometimes.
Yeah. So let's just have a look and see what the cats are saying in the chat here. So back on, cool. Yep. Thanks, Soda. When did Ronnie join the band? Just wondering. So do you want to just tell Soda Pop that? Soda Pop's asking, when did Ronnie join the band?
Yeah. With Mick Taylor just handing his resignation and unannounced overnight, the Stones were obviously about to record a new album, and they knew that the powers that be wanted them to go on the road. So Ron Wood was basically an audition guitar player in Black and Blue, and then he got the nod and got the job to tour with him in 75. So not an official member at that stage, but pretty much had cemented his place as far as the look and the attitude, and I guess later on the sound. So yeah, 75.
Yeah, well, as a tangent to what we're talking about tonight, we've agreed that one of the reasons why we think Ronnie fitted in so well, because there were a lot of theories and there are a lot of guys that could have been part of the band, a couple of American cats, but we'd realised, I think we'd agreed, that the Stones realised that they were going to be touring. That was going to be a big part of their work. So having a guitarist who was going to play week in, week out in these concerts, that was probably an important thing. And also somebody who was going to keep up with Keith.
Yeah, and it's a good point that he mentioned. I'm glad he mentioned about Ron Wood, because the Faces, a big part of their sound was Chuck Berry. Stay With Me, they did some Chuck Berry covers. They would warm up their live shows by listening to Get Yayas out to get them in the groove. So I guess Ron Wood was a natural fit as far as keeping that Chuck Berry spirit going, because he could play that rhythm very well too. So yeah, no, it's they're playing Chuck Berry as well today as they were 40, 50, 60 years ago, those guys.
Well, what I've always said, when I've had conversations about Carol, for example, you know, if you look at the list of songs that they did, Johnny Be Good, Come On, Bye Bye Johnny, Carol, Around and Around, You Can Catch Me, I'm Talking About You, and Little Queenie, just to name a few. Carol and Little Queenie, if you listen to Carol, for example, after Keith's got about 6 years or 5 years under his belt, he plays with that freedom, that looseness that you were talking about earlier before when we had that show with the technical issues.
Yep.
How he's got that swing, and that's in full display, isn't it, on the Get Your Yayas album?
Yeah, because on their first album they did their first version of Carol, and it sounded like it sounds good. It's obviously fast, but it sounds like he'd learnt the notes. He'd been basically rehearsing the song for months on end. But by the time, like you say, Get Yayas out and all that road hardness had come in, he could relax and get the groove. Because it's actually quite very English and quite stiff, that first 64 version, wasn't it? It was good.
Well, I think most of that album was all done in one. All the songs were one takes, weren't they? A chunk of them.
Yeah, one. They wanted to capture the sound that they were doing in the clubs, so they wanted to basically just run through their set list from the clubs. And very primitive studio, as we know, 2-track system for glossing up songs or anything. It was pretty primitive. But once again, everybody used before is the energy. And that's just such an important part of not only the Stones, but what Chuck Berry brought into music was energy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right, and I think we've discussed this and agreed on this too before, that the Stones were a band that did their homework. By 1962, Brian Jones had it all worked out. You were saying earlier before, Ian Stewart was heavily influenced by
Johnny Johnson.
He had it all worked out, before, and obviously Brian saw that and said, "Man, this cat can play. He's in."
Yep. And it added some authenticity. You can play Chuck Berry with maybe a guitar, 2 guitars, bass, and drum, but you add that piano, it takes on a different life. It's how it's supposed to be. Because a big part of Chuck was Johnny Johnson. And Chuck, Keith in his infinite wisdom had figured out that Chuck played in Johnny Johnson keys, which were piano keys. Major keys, happy keys, bright sound. Jumping out. So yeah, as much as the Open G was Keith's little signature, the signature to rock was the Chuck Berry sound. Bright sounding major chords, double stops, rhythm, boogie. Don't forget the lyrics.
Soda Pop's just sorry to steer us off a tangent, but Soda Pop's asking about the replacement to Brian Jones, and he's making a comment here about Jeff Beck wasn't a right fit. I don't think Jeff Beck was ever considered, was he?
I think his name was mentioned as far as just around circles, but not really. I mean,
and Clapton wasn't a serious contender either, even though his name was thrown out there. I think that the serious contenders were certainly, who was that guy that recorded we were only talking about him a couple of shows ago.
Roy Buchanan?
No, the other guy who recorded half the songs on Tattoo You.
Oh, Mick Taylor?
No, American.
Oh, on Black and Blue.
Yeah, Black and Blue, sorry.
Harvey Mandel.
Who? Yeah,
Harvey
yeah,
Mandel.
that's it. Harvey, yeah. All these names.
But Harvey Mandel and Wayne Perkins were only mentioned when the second replacement with Mick Taylor left. When
Wayne Perkins. That was the name. So he's certainly on record with the Stones, and was a serious contender. But I think in the end, the Stones wanted an Englishman, didn't they? That was clear.
Well, we had two periods where the Stones needed new guitar players after Brian died. It was kicked out, then died. And then, obviously, when Mick Taylor handed his notice in. But I'm not sure who was passed around after Brian died. I think they mentioned Roy Buchanan. I don't know if Wayne Perkins or Harvey Mandel were in the picture then at all. This was 69. But I think guys like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck were too good, too busy, and had big egos. You know, they were just.
Sorry, contenders for Brian Jones's drop after Brian Jones left. Sorry.
Yeah.
You guys knew that. You guys in the chat knew that. Yeah. They knew that.
So Mick Taylor was perfect because he came from that John Mayall blues school. Peter Green was already with Fleetwood Mac. Eric Clapton he already had a big head. He was already with Blind Faith. Mick Taylor was with nobody. I mean, he's with somebody, but a nobody, because he had all that talent, but he was ready. Why not? So, yeah, the world would never be the same afterwards.
No, it's okay. It's okay, Satterpop. We change subjects all the time. So that's one of the great things about doing a show like this, is that you guys in the chat can contribute to it, and Carl and I, it's for everybody. And Carl and I can go down the tracks that you guys want to go to.
It all intertwines.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I don't think we can underestimate, obviously, Chuck Berry's role. If you read the biography, Keith's biography, he clearly holds him in a reverential way.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's face it. Every Stones concert, they do 2 Chuck Berry covers. I mean, the Stones are all about, letting your hair down and kicking your shoes off and having a good time, and Chuck's a big part of that, and a big part of Keith's guitar playing. He incorporated that Chuck sound into not Chuck covers, but other songs. It's Only Rock and Roll. That's the Chuck Berry riff down pat, the solo and everything. Pretty much, isn't it? Let Me Go, She's So, all those songs. Star Star, it's a Chuck Berry ripoff. I mean, no one owns the licks, but Chuck definitely gave us this bounty of licks to choose from. The double stops
and we mentioned it earlier in the other show. Even the Beatles, they ripped off Chuck Berry riffs.
But didn't John Lennon have an album called Rock and Roll? There's some Chuck Berry stuff on there, wasn't it?
Yeah. He for him in particular, it was rock and roll. That was what lit his fire. Seeing Elvis and Chuck Berry as opposed to the blues, say for the Stones, being the main driving force or foundation for them. With the Beatles, it was rock and roll.
And speaking of John and the Beatles, they do a fantastic version of rock and roll music on Beatles for Sale or one of those first early albums. They did some really good Chuck covers. And obviously John singing, because John loved Chuck. So all those English bands cut their teeth on some Chuck covers, all of them. I mean, Eric Clapton did Monkey Business, didn't he, with the Yardbirds?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Beatles did some Chuck covers. Stones made no apology that they're a Chuck band. All of them. And then Beach Boys single-handedly made their whole career of Chuck, basically keeping keeping the chord changes, but rearranging the lyrics. Surfing USA instead of Sweet Little 16. It's just the same stops and starts. Happy about that, you know that, eh? You know that Chuck wasn't happy about that. Down the freeway, hearing your song with someone else just changing the lyrics, it would make you mad. But I think they paid him out too.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he got paid out at all.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I wrote a few things down here. So Chuck's themes were about school, holidays, weekends, cars, fun, dancing, music, rebellion, family, food, girls, and optimism. So with the school lyrics, up in the morning and going off to school, you know, teaching the golden teachers rule. Holidays, weekends, flying out for my baby last Saturday night. It's from You Can't Catch Me. Cars, walking towards a coffee-coloured Cadillac. That's from Nadine, which Bruce Springsteen said, who the hell drives a coffee-coloured Cadillac? Makes you think, doesn't it? Dancing and music. Oh, sorry, fun. Cruising and playing the radio with no particular place to go. Dancing and music. All the cats want to dance with. Sweet Little 16. Rebellion. Oh, daddy, daddy, I beg of you. Whisper to mummy it's all right with you. Can I go out and dance, mum? Food. Mum is cooking chicken fried bacon crease. Come on along. It's just down the road a piece.
Yeah.
Great. Optimism. His son named Johnny B. Good was going to be making some motion pictures in Hollywood. I mean, he's a poet. I mean, and I think he embodies a big part of the American dream of working, shiny car, a house, a lady, a family, singing, positive images. Some of the girls are a little bit young, but overall positive.
And the ups and downs of life too, because he got in trouble financially a few times too, didn't he? You know, you make a lot of money, and unfortunately, we've seen it right through the history of music, of rock and roll, of, you know, unscrupulous managers and friends that want to hang on, and you know, wives who want to take more than probably what they should be entitled to. Yeah, he got into trouble there a couple of times, but he was clever enough to learn from those lessons. Is it true that he got paid in cash when he went to these fly-in gigs?
Yeah. I remember watching a video, and he packed really streamlined, had one spare set of clothes, a toothbrush, a comb, had to get paid in advance, didn't trust anybody, didn't know who the pickup band was. He didn't tell the band to rehearse, didn't tell them what keys are in. They had to play pretty much, they had to be good to play behind Chuck, because Chuck wasn't telling them anything to do. Chuck would start the song.
Hey, Soda Pop, I don't have a ES335. I've got a the closest I've got's an Epiphone Sheraton, which is Epiphone's version. But Carl has an ES 355 somewhere. Have you got it handy?
No.
Oh.
We'll show it soon.
Yeah. So you got to have a hollow body guitar.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another big part of his sound was the humbuckers and the hollow body. That was unique. Prior to that, we had full-bodied Tellys and Strats, and a bit later on, solid-bodied Gibsons. So,
yeah, he was quite unique too, wasn't he? Because he was able to get some overdriven sounds.
Yep. That first song, Maybelline, and a lot of people don't know this too, a lot of his influence came from country and rockabilly. So he wasn't a blues guy. He was actually very much a rocking country guy too. And don't forget the jazz, T-Bone Walker. So that basically created his sound, the T-Bone Walker jazzy blues, and that rockabilly kind of sound with the white kids, you know, because they would slap the bass, you know, they would get it going, get it going down, boys. So, yeah, and obviously sprinklings of blues. He was just a very clever guy, clever songs.
So if anybody hasn't seen that DVD that came out, I think 86, or it's a video, 86, or is it 86 or 88, Carl, with the How Rock and Roll?
I think it's about 86.
Yeah, you check it out. I think there's clips of it or chunks of it on YouTube, but it's a good insight into how Keith and Chuck worked. And there's a couple of classic scenes in there where if you haven't seen it, I won't give it away too much, where Chuck sort of tells Keith how to play the guitar. It's hilarious.
What Keith was doing was not wrong, but Chuck said that the way he played it, which was the right way because he wrote it, was the right way, which I'll show you. So instead of going up, I want you to go down.
I want you to slur.
But in the end, and it probably sound a little bit better.
There's when Keith looks at him, there's a second there. If looks could kill.
Yeah, and there's a couple other things on that video.
And that's not scripted, man. That's not scripted, is it? That's real. That's not bullshit.
Keith, Chuck wanted to mess up the whole half a song by changing key because that's what he could do. It's his song, and he was clever. And then you could see Keith saying, "No, we're staying with B flat." So yeah, because the band was running hot. They'd rehearsed. And yeah. No, it's a really neat. I really enjoyed Etta James. I really enjoyed Julian Lennon. I mean, let's face it, Eric Clapton smoked that solo, beautiful. The rhythm band was NRBQ's bass player. I mean, I think Robert Cray was on there, was he? Robert Cray was on there. Yep.
Yep.
But obviously Chuck stole the show because that's his music.
And he did the duck walk.
Yes, and he looked great for 60, didn't he? Didn't look a day over 40. He wasn't a drinker, eh? Wasn't a drinker. Didn't do drugs. He just liked. I think he liked a bit of herb.
And girls.
Yeah, young girls. So he's interesting too. He wasn't a very healthy guy, but the world would never be the same, ever. I mean, all the hot rod shows, all blaring out Chuck Berry. You go to the beach, California, the white sand, the girls' bikinis, hot dog. You know, he's such a clever guy. My friend Lance, who you met, we went over to America. He just loved Chuck Berry coming out of his hot rod.
Wow.
We go to the hot rod shows. It's just Chuck Berry everywhere.
Really?
Big time. It's just, and Beach Boys. Just that fun, up-tempo music. You know, and you're hearing lyrics that you remember that are just embedded in your mind about, you know, walking towards a coffee-coloured Cadillac, cruising and playing the radio with no particular place to go. All the cats want to dance with, sweet little 16. I mean, here's one about the girls looking like the model on the cover of a magazine. You know.
How good do you think those shows were when he did those fly-in shows? How good do you think they would have been?
his pickup bands, like various places around the world.
Yeah, like
Hit or miss.
Yeah, hit and miss.
Yeah, hit and miss.
I suppose as much as you're a Chuck Berry, you're only going to be as good as your backing band too, aren't you? I suppose.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he would do that. It's almost like he was so proud that it's my show. I do what I like. Take it or leave it. But you're going to pay me first, regardless. Because I think there's countless videos of him on YouTube, and some of them sound really good, and others sound a bit flat. So, yeah, but from a backing band's point of view, A, great to play with the king, but B, it'd make them play better, get their ears going, clean out their wax. What Kiwian guys? We've got to keep up with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Simon's saying that he saw Chuck 15 years ago. He was great even at 80. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he didn't tell me he had the tickets. He's taking a date there, and he was like 1 or 2 rows back in one of those old. What great thing about America is every city's still got their little miniature Royal Albert Hall. They don't tear those down. What do they call them? Like Simon was calling them ballrooms. Big velvet curtains, and you wait you got the bleachers waiting in the wings. Very, old-fashioned seating. Big curtains. He played there, and he said it was just amazing. 80 years old, duck walk, and getting a lot of notes out of the songs.
So Arvin's saying he knew a couple of musicians who were teenagers in the 50s. They both said Chuck was the guy. They kind of thought Elvis was a poof, but they tolerated him because they liked Scotty Moore. I've heard that, Arvin. I've heard that before.
Well, I read Elvis's book. He definitely wanted to. Later on, when he got a bit unfortunately drugged out, he definitely wanted to project a tough guy image, which he didn't have. Shooting the TV, having the Memphis Mafia around him, but he wasn't that guy. He had, he played a bit of football, but he was very much a sensitive guy. So, basically a church-going boy, raised really well. Not a tough guy. Chuck was pretty tough.
Here's another cool point here that Soda Pop's making. Angus from AC/DC copying the duck walk. That's correct.
Angus, Chuck.
Yep.
AC/DC should pay back half their money they've ever made to Chuck Berry. They've got their own little unique thing with those power chords. But a lot of those solos have got those double stops, haven't they?
Absolutely.
And the jack and all that stuff.
Yeah, you play a double stop through a nice amp and with a good overdrive pedal. It sounds good, man. It's glorious. And turn it up and lean up against it. It's awesome.
Oh, you know what it does? The double stops demand presence. Especially, see Chuck Berry would launch into the song like Johnny Be Good, and all you're hearing is him playing, and then they hear the drum do this, and the bass drum go really good. So yeah. Getting back to Chuck Berry, the man, the showman, the songwriter, the poet, the guitar player, the revolutionary, the singer, and I think a prophet.
Do we want to talk about Chuck as far as an engineer or a producer goes? So did he have a role as far as developing his sound? That a lot of artists eventually like to take over. They like to be in the production booth. They want to be controlling what they're producing. Do you get a sense that Chuck was one of those kind of guys?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I imagine he's got a very strong personality. I imagine he would be listening to the takes. You know, we saw a glimpse of that with his Keith's version of Carol being not what he thought. We saw glimpses of, 2, 3, 4 takes, getting the songs right. I imagine a guy like that, who's basically the arranger, the songwriter, the singer, the showman, the act, I would imagine he would have had a lot of control in the studio. I imagine he would have. But that, I don't know the finer points.
No, nor do I. Maybe that's something that we can maybe do some research on, and maybe touch on next week when we do next week's show.
Yeah. No, he just like I said, I was thinking about before. The great album covers, the great singles, blasting through the airplay. All these kids trying to. I mean, let's face it. We've talked about people that work in guitar stores getting driven to suicide, losing their hair, not going to sleep because of Stairway to Heaven, Sunshine of Your Love. How many times they heard Johnny Be Good play terribly too?
So Soda Pop's asking, who did Chuck listen to? I think you touched upon that on the earlier show when we had some technical issues. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on who Chuck was listening to? Because that's interesting. People will be probably surprised.
Yeah. So early on, there was a guy called Charlie Christian, who was an incredible guitar player that played jazz with a bit of speed. When I say speed, not fast, but some beautiful licks. Then T-Bone Walker came into the scene. He did that big jazz blues sound, and he was a showman. You've seen those pictures of him playing behind his head, through his legs, doing the splits. And you can't help Chuck absorbing some of that. And then Chuck being St. Louis, he would have seen a lot of country acts with the tellies, the slap bass, the juke joints, a bit of church music, I think. So I think Chuck would have been a combination of A, a genius, B, having a plan of his own, but absorbing all the white rockabilly acts, the jazz T-Bone Walker. It's a famous song. It's called, I think, T-Bone Blues, and you get to hear the lick that Chuck's copied, basically. And then Charlie Christensen, way back in the day. So, but what Chuck did was basically create his own sound. No one else sounded like him.
Yeah, I'm going to say that certainly the country guitarists he was listening to had an influence. For him to take that double stop, for example, and play that, and to play some of those single note solos.
Yeah.
You could argue that stems from the country guys, as opposed to what the solid blues guys were doing, which is just hammering maybe a part of a scale or chords. But yeah, I would say that he was listening to a lot of country guys, because
yeah.
that comes through a lot in his music.
Because he did do a lot of
technical skill that you have to have.
Yeah, because when you're playing minor chords, which a lot of blues is minor, and when you're playing E, A, and B a lot, obviously you're going to get a certain sound, but you're going to get a lot of soul and passion from it, because you're doing a lot of bends, a lot of crying sound. With the double stops and major keys, you're getting a lot of a fun sound. I'll just play this Shuffling the Blues here. Can you hear it?
So there's a lot going on in there, Carl. There's a lot going on there. There's Charlie Christian and some country. So I'm hearing lots.
Yep. We're hearing swing. We're hearing jazz. We're hearing some blues, happy blues, I will say, and a lot of country. And it was very much a 4-time beat, wasn't it?
Mm.
It was a forward beat where the blues had the delay. His was a moving beat. So
dance music.
That's it. Chuck comes on any place. Bob Seger. Let's give me some of that old time rock and roll. That's all Chuck. Don't take me to a disco. I don't even want to get on the floor.
I'm not going to sing.
Hey, we got a giant on our hands, and the fact that he lived to 90, the fact that he kept playing till the day he died, what a legend. So just a few points. Major chords. He played major chords. The duck walk, his showmanship, fun to watch. The images of happiness and joy. And just having an epiphany about an hour ago before the show started, he was giving not only the audience but the Americans the sense of, here's the American dream. Work for your boss, do your 40, pay your bills, get your tires fixed, shine your car, head out to the juke joint with little Queenie and do the bobby socks. And if you're lucky enough there, someone's going to be cooking chicken fried bacon grease. Come on, Mum, it's just down the road a piece. You know, just amazing lyrics. Amazing. So yeah. I mean, what else was out there besides that? I mean, obviously we had the blues. We had Elvis. We had Gene Vincent.
Oh, well, the Stones were certainly influenced from a songwriting point of view too by Chuck Berry. You know, Straight Cat Blues, for example. You know, the first. You know, to me, that's Chuck. You know, the lyrics. That's Chuck. It's
was she 13 or 15?
Depending on what version. Yeah. So. Yeah.
The X-rated or the green X-rated.
But yeah, you know. To me, that's you know that's got a direct link to Chuck Berry as well. So even though it was originally recorded in was it Open D or something, but you can play it in standard. But yeah, hugely influential, and Keith says so very clearly in his biography, doesn't he?
Yeah,
for the Stones.
The Stones would have done about at least 10 Chuck songs in their career. At least 10. And they do them well, which is great. Chuck was one of my original heroes. Seriously. He's just too good. Just too good.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to argue with you. Again, like I said earlier, when I was digging into the Stones and they were talking about, these blues cats and, Chuck Berry, it's certainly through the Stones that I went and listened to Chuck Berry and paid attention to him and was, surprisingly blown away, because 15, 16-year-old aspiring guitar player, you're listening to everything that's out there, and so you're listening to this guy that's a rock and roll legend playing guitar. And what's interesting here in New Zealand, and this relates back to what Arvin was saying, Chuck Berry doesn't get celebrated. He doesn't get spoken about in the same sense, obviously, that Elvis Presley does. You know, I don't even think it'd be number 3 or number 4. They'd probably say Elvis, maybe The Killer,
Little Richard.
Little Richard, and then you might get Chuck Berry. But I certainly think, well, you know, he's number 2.
Well, Chuck Berry pretty much wrote 9 out of 10 of his songs. Right?
Which is another thing. Elvis didn't write any songs.
No. Elvis was a showman to a point, but he didn't play guitar like Chuck Berry. Elvis was at the mercy of lots of little things. He was at the mercy of a good backing band. He was at the mercy of other songs being...
And he had a hot band. He had a hot band, man.
Yeah. He was at the mercy of... I mean, if he didn't have his looks, he'd be pretty much... I don't think he would have made it. The other thing that he did not have... I mean, he was a showman, obviously, but he was singing other people's songs. So he didn't have. I think if this affected Elvis in the future, he didn't have control. And then he obviously had the Colonel breathing down his neck, and Hollywood studios saying, "Let's sing Old MacDonald had a farm in the back of a chicken truck going to Baby Acapulco."
Kissing cousins.
And dressing up as an Indian and Kid Galahad and
yeah.
There's some horror ones.
Yeah.
I don't think Chuck was in movies.
Yeah, there's some horrors, but actually, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah, you know, Chuck took control. Chuck had right from again, and we made reference to this movie, Cadillac Records. If you cats haven't seen that movie, I can recommend it. But clearly, you can see in that movie too, there's the actor who's portraying Chuck Berry very clearly is in control of what was happening. So yeah, that's another point to celebrate. You know, this guy did what he wanted to do.
Well, and Elvis did a couple of covers of Chuck's songs, but more importantly, Jerry Lee Lewis, who we love, he has some of his most famous work as Chuck Berry covers. He did them really well, because that was that white honky tonk music that Chuck would have absorbed into a little bit. Let's face it. See, Chuck, that sound that Chuck got on his guitar came from that rocking piano. So a lot of those guys are doing that Chuck sound before Chuck was coming along. Johnny Johnson, Jerry Lewis, a lot of those blues piano players. So he was clever enough to say, let's just adapt this to the guitar. So yeah, he is one of a kind.
The first rock and roll guitar hero.
Yep. And the first one to say, I'm my own man. I am my own man. I mean, how many versions of Johnny B. Good have there been done? Just Dr. Feelgood did it. I think they've done some heavy metal versions. It's just, it's just unreal.
We've done a version.
I think every guitar center that sells guitars has heard a version. Whether it's good or bad or not, I don't know. I have to give them a call in the morning. But Chuck, the showman, the musician, the guy basically gave everybody. I mean, consider yourself in England in 1963, typical winter, dreary summer. You know, everything's pretty bland. Chuck comes through the airwaves talking about shining his Cadillac and going to the beach with a girl and having a fire at night and, you know, and milkshakes and maybe some whiskey. To hear that, you'd be thinking, I've got to get the hell out of my place. That's why a lot of them went to America. You know, there was another song we talked about. So many good songs, not necessarily the American Dream, but he talked about the way it should be or something, you know. So yeah. So the songs he played, not only the rock sound, but basically gave you a way out.
So Guitar Hack saying Judas Priest did a version. Dan Sullivan saying Motorhead do a cover of Johnny B. Good. Did Hendrix do a version too? Because Jimmy T saying Hendrix did a version too.
Absolutely.
I can't remember Hendrix's version.
I think it's on Radio 1.
Wow.
Yeah, not too bad. It's pretty out in the clouds. He took Chuck. He took Chuck's Cadillac and gave it some wings and flew up a bit. It's out in the clouds a bit. Oh, there's been so many versions. John Rolls, you know.
So we've got a new person in the chat. What's up, Doc? What's up, Doc? Thank you for joining us. What's up, Doc? I love that. That's pretty cool. Where's Carl? Gone to get this. Gone to get his Gibson, or gone to check dinner? Oh,
just making sure the boiled eggs are going to be ready for tomorrow.
Awesome. I really appreciated tonight's show, mate. It's I'm looking at the time because you're on a schedule.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We are sorry about the little 20-minute technical malfunction. I mean, when I'm seeing you and you're seeing me, I just presume the whole world's seeing me.
No, and it's really important that the whole world sees you. So that's why we deleted the show, because it's important that you're on. You know, this is So we just have to make sure we'll have a checklist and make sure your camera's on.
Yeah, no, cool. So in the 4-part series, we're debatable whether we talk about Bo Diddley next week or Elvis or Muddy Waters, but we'll just cross that bridge when it comes. But I'm glad that we got to share and basically is such a heavyweight force in music. You know, he's the sort of guy that comes through the door with his guitar and he's just by himself and he basically takes the stage.
Yeah, Simon raises a good point too that we haven't spoken about, that we should probably touch on before we go. It's and I think they make reference to that in that movie Cadillac Records, where Chuck Berry realizes that Alan Freed had put his name on the record as a co-writer. Remember?
Yeah.
And he didn't write it at all.
Dodgy. So he thought, oh well, I'm the DJ. I'm doing Chuck a favor by playing all these songs. I might as well get some credit. But regardless, other stations will be playing Chuck anyway because he was so good.
Yeah, dodgy, eh?
Yeah, he was an interesting one. They reckon that Alan Freed coined the word or penned the word rock and roll came from him. Don't know, that's debatable. Awesome. But I just got my favourite memories. I mean, I've got a lot of memories of music, but one of my favourite memories is Chuck in full force going across that stage with the duck walk, doing a Johnny B. Good solo in his red shirt and his big hair and big smile, big boots. Just so much fun, you know.
I love that guitar.
His 335 was 355.
I loved it.
because he's got a red one, and he sometimes plays a darker maroony wine Merlot colour one too, doesn't he?
I'll take any of that. And black.
And black, yeah. He's an interesting guy because Chess Records cut him loose about 64, 65, and he never really recovered. Did a few neat albums in the early 70s. They're okay. But till that point, he could make so much money off his royalties from his great stuff, but he could just tour when he really liked it. And he loved to tour. And don't forget his personality and his sense of humour when he's on those talk shows. Gifted man.
And he went back home to his wife.
St. Louis?
Mm.
Yeah. She was the main one. Number one. Yeah.
You've got to have a number one.
That's it. So thank you, Chuck. Thank you for giving this Chuck to the Stones. Thank you, the Stones, for playing Chuck well. Thank you. I'm a big Beach Boys fan. I've got to say, I love the Beach Boys. Thank you, Beach Boys, for doing Chuck well. You should have asked him first, but that's okay. I think you paid him out.
Thank you, AC/DC, for doing Chuck Berry really well.
and Bob Seger. And hey, there's not, and Chuck's so good to even people who don't like music or layman's when it comes to musical term. They can familiarise themselves by being in a good place watching Back to the Future or Pulp Fiction. They'll be like, "What's this? I don't know who the guy is. This sounds cool." You cannot. What's that?
Hey, don't forget My Ding-a-Ling too. Simon's making reference to that in the chat.
Those that live at London sessions, were they?
Yeah. Don't forget my yeah. On second thoughts, let's forget it. My Ding-a-Ling. Oh, what a legend! Hey guys, look, Guitar Hack, what's up, Doc? Thanks for joining us. Arvin, always a pleasure to see you. Simon, our friend and co-contributor to the show, all the way from England. Jimmy T from Aussie, always good to see Jimmy T. Thanks for dropping by. Who else we got here? Soda Pop, who's gone to bed or gone somewhere. Who else have I missed? That's everybody. Thanks for coming back for part 2. And peace and love from New Zealand. We wish you well. And Carl and I will be back next week for a continuation on another key component towards the Stones development. We'll talk about who that person will be and post it a couple of hours before the show.
Yeah,
we haven't made that decision yet, have we?
No. I mean, I've got an idea. I mean, it doesn't really matter which order these guys go in because they all relate to each other. But I think it's going to be neat, a 4-part series about these guys that really moulded the Stones sound. All from different backgrounds.
Have to be Muddy Waters then. We should do Muddy. We should do Muddy next week.
Yep, I'd really like to do Bo Diddley at one point. Simply based on the fact that he had his own sound. And he had a guy in his band that played the maracas, who was the unsung hero.
And then we have to also talk about, Rogers.
Jimmy Reed Taylor? Or Jimmy Rogers?
Jimmy Reed, sorry.
Yeah.
Because he, as we know, they used to tried to study him for hours.
Yep. And in conclusion, talk about, I think these two big as Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly. because Buddy Holly, what the Beach Boys did to Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly did to Bo Diddley. That Not Fade Away.
Yep.
That's a Bo Diddley lick.
Yeah, and okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I've got some notes on that Buddy Holly song, and yeah, we can talk about that. That'll be one show because that was groundbreaking.
Well, Brian Jones doing that Mona was amazing, and the use of the tremolo.
Yeah, that's groundbreaking. That song for the Stones. Yeah. So no, well, yeah. So we've got a couple of couple of cool shows coming up, so that we can do some research on that. That sounds good.
Yeah. Take the emphasis off the Stones and give some of these heavyweights. To us, they get a lot of credit, but to a lot of other people, they don't because they don't know them. They need to learn about them.
Yeah, I think though, what I'll do in my capacity, I'll always link it back to the Stones if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cheers, guys. Do you want to say goodbye, mate? I'll leave the last word up to you if you want.
Yeah, no, great. It was good to be back on. We had a week last week of some commitments that came up during the course of the week, which is unfortunate because we're both psyched to do the show. Sorry about the technical difficulty before. But to summarize, Chuck Berry is American music. Chuck Berry is rock and roll. Chuck Berry basically impregnated the guitar, and the guitar had some babies called Keith Richards, Eric Clapton, and Eddie Van Halen, and who's the AC/DC guy?
Angus.
Angus Young.
Motorhead. Who else? Motorhead, Judas Priest. Jeepers.
Absolutely.
Slayer. I'm getting carried away now.
Yeah.
But I think we all get the point.
Yes, that he was the father of rock and roll. Let's face it. I mean, I love Jerry Lee Lewis. I love Elvis Presley. I love who else was big? Carl Perkins, to a lesser extent, Scotty Moore. But I think it starts really with Chuck Berry himself.
Well, for me, rock and roll is about the guitar, and obviously. Obviously, yeah. So rock and roll is about the guitar. So Keith Richards wouldn't be a musician, I don't think, had he not heard Chuck Berry. And Chuck Berry being the guitarist, and we touched on this earlier. Elvis couldn't play, and yeah, maybe we can talk about this a little bit next week. Why isn't Chuck celebrated as much as Elvis is? I'm going to do some research on.
Yeah, good point. Because we love Elvis. Mick Jagger loved Elvis.
Yeah. Oh yeah, mate, I'm not ditching Elvis. I love him too. I'm not ditching him.
Yeah, but I remember you telling me that how many times do people actually listen to all his records? They don't. There's a bit of watered downness to him, which is unfortunate. His scope was so wide that he was all over the show. So Chuck stuck to his roots. I think Elvis had a golden voice, had a beautiful look. I think they were predicting him as America's favorite son. And that's probably the powers that be that found him very safe, marketable, and appealing. He wasn't really that rebellious, let's face it.
So are you saying that Chuck Berry was dangerous?
A little bit.
Mm.
A little bit. He was a bit wild. A couple of young girls in the back of his Cadillac driving across state lines with no license and permits. Playing a show.
Mm.
I guess conservative America found Elvis like conservative England found Beatles safe. He's just a stray that's coming to my house.
Awesome. You always get strays.
What do you do? He's actually pretty well behaved. Besides, yeah. No. Good point. Good point about Chuck. Chuck in the mainstream. That he was popular enough to be on TV, on the radio, making money. He wasn't. I think in that movie did Mos Def who played Chick, didn't they have some problems at a gig he wasn't supposed to play? Or did something happen in one clip, eh?
Because he was black. Because he was black.
Or they knocked on his door and a white girl was in there. Some scene in there, eh, in Cadillac Records.
Yeah. Oh no, that was in his car, in one of his Cadillacs, in the car park. But he was at a gig and got into trouble because, jeepers, I'll have to watch that again. But it was because he was black. Anyway.
Yep.
I think they booked him because they thought he was a white cat. and he turned up and really.
You look a bit different.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. Now, whether or not that's true or not, or whether that's just part of the film, but I suppose the point is it's emphasising something that we know historically happened in some parts of the state.
Chuck did some time inside,
for taking girls across the state line.
He did some jail time.
And carried a I don't want to say it, a GUN too, didn't he?
I think so. You think so? Yeah. Yes. He's a very strong, independent-willed man, but has some issues.
We love him.
Yeah.
We love a bit of Barry. Right, we're out of here.
Yeah. How would it have sounded if you played a Telecaster? Just wouldn't have worked.
I'd still, mate. He could play
anything.
He could play anything, and it would have worked. I think at that time, you know, certainly they wanted. He was the first rock and roll god, so you know he was going to make anything sing.
Yeah. Cool. I better give it. This better be a wrap. The cat's getting crazy.
Cheers.
See ya.
Hey, thanks, guys.
We'll chapter 2 next week.